Basics of spreadsheets. First of all, we need to create a spreadsheet. So I am in my Google Drive, and I generally like to work within folders. So I have a folder, and inside of that folder I have another folder, and that's where I want to create this spreadsheet. So I click on Create, and I want to create a spreadsheet. Now I want to go over some basics of spreadsheets in this first lesson. When you create a new spreadsheet, as any other Google Doc, the first thing you need to do is name it. I'm going to click here where it's called Untitled Spreadsheet because whenever you create a new document, it's untitled. And this is Lesson 1. And I just save that, say OK. Now notice my title is Lesson 1. Under File, I can check real quickly, move to folder, and I can check and see where is this actually stored. And I can see, if I scroll down, I happen to have known this, that it actually has a check mark in front of ORVSD, and then underneath that is Beaverton. It's in there, so I don't really need to move it. It's already where I wanted it to be. So when you create a folder or a file, make sure you're in the right folder, and then it actually is already where it needs to be. What I want to do in this first lesson is go over some basic spreadsheet functions. A spreadsheet is really a system or a set of rows and columns. And if I slide over to the right here, I can see that a Google spreadsheet takes me over to column T. So columns A through T, that's about, what is that? U, V, W, X, Y, Z. It's like 22 columns or something. And sometimes when I'm working in a spreadsheet, I really don't want that many columns. So let's say I don't want from column H over to T. I clicked in the header, and then I'm going to click on any one of these. I'm going to right click on that and go, I want to actually delete columns H through T. Now notice my spreadsheet's only columns A through G wide. A default Google spreadsheet has 100 rows, and I don't really want that right now, so I'm going to click on row 21 in the header of the row header and drag down and go ahead and right click, and I'm going to delete rows 21 through 100. So you've just learned how to delete rows and simplify a spreadsheet down to a smaller size. Now notice this top left corner. If I click there, that selects all of the spreadsheet. If I click in a column, I select that column. If I click in a row, I select that row. That's an important feature of spreadsheets that you need to know. Now let me type something in row A1, or excuse me, cell A1. This is a cell that is pretty small. Okay, now notice it's overwritten the cell, the size of the cell, and when I hit enter, it's got text wrap on, so that cell has grown in size to fit the contents. Now, if I were to double click, notice when I move my cursor between cell columns A and B and double click when it turns into that arrow, if I double click, the cell widens out to be as big as it needs to be to show you all the contents of the cell without wrapping. Now, if I were to, another spreadsheet function, if I click on a cell and want to duplicate it, I can click and notice when the cursor turns to this crosshair and drag across to these other cells, all of those cells now say the same thing as cell A1. I didn't have to retype that data. And if I actually wanted to do this, I could drag that down a couple of rows. Okay, now that all says the same thing. Now notice, cell A is big enough to hold it, but cells B through G are not. Now if I wanted all of the cells to be big enough to hold the text that's contained within them, I would select the entire contents and I would go click, click, and now all the cells are big enough to hold their data. Now if I have the entire spreadsheet selected and I want everything to shrink down to a particular size, I can click in one of those regions between the cell headers, and that would move that back in size. That's some basic functioning of just managing your spreadsheet. Select columns, select rows, select the entire thing, double click in between rows to spread things out, and click and drag the contents of a cell down to duplicate it. Very basic spreadsheet functions.